We're standing on the edge of Lag B-Omer. Let's not fall in. Tomorrow night is the beginning of Lag B-Omer, and the following day is Lag B-Omer. Lag B-Omer is generally celebrated throughout the Jewish world by observant people in the middle of the Omer that goes between Pesach and Shavuos. And it's usually celebrated by little children playing with bows and arrows and people going hiking and barbecues. The biggest, most dramatic thing is bonfires. People make very, very big bonfires and sing and dance. And they go to visit the kever of Shimon Bar Yochai. It's a day in which the laws of mourning that were added to the time of the Omer are suspended. So people get haircuts, there are weddings, music is played. For some, it goes back into force the day after the Omer. For most, it is the end of the laws of mourning, and the rest of the Omer should be a joyous time, in fact. But the Omer itself raises many, many questions. And I wanted to address them because, in fact, the Lag B-Omer, Lag Lamed Gimel 33, the 33rd day of the Omer, is associated with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, one of the students of Rabbi Akiva, who survived the plague. In fact, he became one of the 5 remaining ones after the plague that killed 24,000 or 12,000 pairs of the students of Rabbi Akiva. I want to pass this out, and people should try and share. Maybe you... so that you know what it is. You don't have it. Why don't you and Yelena share?
Yes, okay, cool.
Okay. So this is a fairly old article. It dates back to 1995, but has been updated a number of times by Rabbi Pinchas Stolper. I think it was originally published by the Orthodox Union and has been published by numerous others since. When I saw it this year, I was like shocked, because it's something I've been talking about for a long time, and I always tell people, maybe don't talk about this too much because people will think you're crazy. And now I see it in print.
Or somebody else's.
So it's good to see. So I'd like to review a little bit about Lag B-Omer, right? Midway down the first page, it says, Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students who lived 1,850 years ago in Roman-dominated lands of Israel died from a mysterious God-sent plague, an Askara. Why did they die? Right? So,
okay.
So we know many of these things that I'm saying today I've said before, but I think it's A, is worth learning it again, and B, I think we'll bring it right up until today and its importance today, which we really haven't done previously. We know that the Gemara tells us that they died because they didn't show respect for one another. This raises, a tremendous question in itself. It's not as though one was saying, well, I'm the student of this Rebbe, and I'm the student of that Rebbe, and I'm the student of the third Rebbe. They were actually all students of the same Rebbe, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, who said the principal concept of Torah is that one should love the other as himself, right? This was a central principle. Unlike Hillel, who said that don't do unto others what you would not do unto yourselves, Rabbi Akiva was very direct. For a Jew, you must love each other as yourself. Right? Somehow his students didn't seem to get it, it would seem, because they died of a plague caused by disrespect. Right? This is what the Talmud tells us, right? And the Talmud tells us that they died over a 33-day period, between Pesach and Shavuos. It doesn't tell us which 33-day period. As we've discussed before about the Omer, some people hold that this period of mourning begins on Rosh Chodesh Iyar and goes to because nobody wants to mourn during Nisan, a happy time associated with Pesach, so it goes from Rosh Chodesh Iyar till just before Shavuos, the day before Shavuos. Most people hold that it begins on the second day of Pesach and goes to Lag BaOmer. Everybody holds that on Lag BaOmer you don't mourn in any way. There are some, because we don't know, who say, well, the 33 days may have been some of them on this side of Lag BaOmer, some of them on that side of Lag BaOmer. So with the exception of Lag BaOmer, we mourn for the whole 49 days. Right? Some hold that. And over the generations, additional mourning practices have been added to the ones that were created originally. But everybody holds that on this day of Lag BaOmer, that's suspended. Right? So the first question that's raised, I think, is an obvious one, is what does it mean that 24,000 students of the greatest sage of the oral Torah, Rabbi Akiva, is described over and over and over as the Moshe Rabbeinu of the oral Torah. We're not talking about your average sage. We're talking about the top of Chazal. He is that. Right? That he couldn't convey to his students his principal teaching, and for this they died? It's curious.
My question would be, didn't he recognize that there was a problem with the students, and maybe he... I believe he's the greatest.
Yeah, when first 100 died, he had a big meeting and says...
But didn't he, over the years that he's teaching them, he doesn't recognize that, hey, these guys aren't respecting each other. It didn't make it even...
But where does it say in the Torah, not respecting somebody is a death penalty? We're not casual about a death penalty in the Torah. A based din that kills 2 people over 72 years is called a bloody based din.
But Hashem's based din might be different.
Based din, Sanhedrin. It's a based din. Any capital based din can be. It doesn't have to be Sanhedrin.
Period of time within 24,000 died very short period of time.
8,000 a day, over 33 days.
There's another opinion that they went into battle following Bar Kokhba.
So there's another view. There's a letter that was written by an authoritative sage roughly 700 years after that says that they were hunted down after the death of Rabbi Akiva by the Romans and killed by the Romans as well. Now, one always has to remember that the Talmud is written at a time of subjugation of the Jewish people. Not, by the way, unlike Megillah Esther. So maybe things are encoded in the Talmud because you can't say certain things because of censorship, and, it's not good to draw the wrong cartoons these days, as we know, right? So maybe there were certain things that are embedded when they talk about a plague. Maybe that's what they mean in the Talmud, because they couldn't say the great minds of the Jewish world were killed by these terrible Romans, right? Because whoever wrote that would be killed. Right? So it may be that everybody understood what it meant by plague, right? But why the term lack of respect is an interesting thing. The Gemara tells us about the difference between love and respect is that love is something that you see in another. And usually it's a similarity that you see in another. Respect is a difference that you have with somebody you care about. Right? I think I should be wearing a white hat today. My wife thinks I should be wearing a black hat today. Do I love her for that decision? I have to respect her wisdom in that situation, that it's a good idea to wear a black hat today. Right? If she said, gee, that white hat is absolutely charming, you should wear it, I'm glad you chose it, I would have loved that. Right? but I respect the decision. So, what was it with Rabbi Akiva's students? Right? It wasn't a lack of love.
It was lack of respect.
It was a lack of covet, a lack of respect, a lack of honor.
It means it was something different between them.
And by the way, the Torah says you should love your wife as yourself and respect her more, in fact. So what was it with them? It seems that if it was an issue of respect, they must have differed on relatively small items that were questions of, what did our Rebbe mean by this? And concluded that my interpretation is correct and yours is wrong. Whereas perhaps if they respected each other, like Hillel and Shammai, they might have said, my view is right, but yours is not necessarily wrong. Maybe it's right at a different time. You know, one might ask the question, is it safe for a child to cross a busy street? Right? And the answer, of course, is yes and no. When a child is 3 years old, it's absolutely, dangerous. The child, may very well be injured or, heaven forbid, killed. Right? When the child is 17 years old, it's ridiculous to say you have to wait for your grandmother to come to tell you to cross the street. Both children, the street hasn't changed. The circumstances have changed. So where we see Shammai and we see Hillel differ, we don't conclude, Shammai is wrong and Hillel is right. We conclude that we hold by Hillel, but in other circumstances, Shammai might be right. If the students of Rabbi Akiva didn't get that idea, they would have had a lack of respect for one another. But even if they did, killing them for it
seems opinion. Just go to your
seems extreme.
What did you mean?
That's another solution. He was probably very busy. But it seems like an extreme penalty. Right? And in many ways, the point that Shemaiah made rings more true to me personally, that Rabbi Akiva, as we know, declared Bar Kokhba to be the Mashiach, and those 24,000, if Bar Kokhba was Mashiach, may very well have been his shluchim to the world, to bring light to the nations. Mm-hmm. If that was true, once Bar Kokhba was defeated and the sages were killed, then go after the shluchim and get them as well.
I was thinking that it's you can be a great Torah scholar, but how the Torah is conveyed, by the spirit in which it's conveyed, will affect the people that receive it. So let's say if these are going to be the future teachers of the Jewish people, and they don't have respect for, let's say, their fellow Jew, then the Torah knowledge, no matter how great it is they have, it's going to be propagated with maybe some sort of corruption.
It's a very good point.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
It's a very good point.
So maybe Hashem didn't want that.
No, if Rabbi Akiva had those students, 24,000, those sages who were supposed to be on the high level of knowledge and understanding and accepting all the laws of Torah, how it should be, whatever, and they still, nevertheless, did not follow the respect or whatever, what can they teach other people? And it was kind of, I don't know how to call it corruption, but it's negligence to the laws of Torah, kind of. So that's why maybe Hashem could not afford this to be, the people.
Could be.
Maybe we're just now putting together two different explanations. One explanation is respect, whatever, one thing. And another is much more material explanation. They were Jews who were obviously actively going against Romans, and they have to be killed. Do you remember, are you going to talk about night?
I mean, both
I don't want to go all the way back
the thing is, both things can be right in this case.
Both things, but we shouldn't, two marshals we shouldn't put together.
Well, actually, Ezra's point may be a valid point, is that, why did the failure, why did the Bar Kokhba revolt fail, right, is a very important question that comes to the heart of this. We'll get to it in a second, right? Was it purely a military thing, or was it more? We understand that Rabbi Akiva, because he was Rabbi, because he was Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva's decision to be the armor bearer for Bar Kokhba, to describe Bar Kokhba not as Bar Kasiba but as Bar Kokhba, that a star, a son of a star, shall emanate from Yaakov, which is a messianic teaching, right, was not a mistake. Nowhere do we look and say, oh, Rabbi Akiva made a mistake. In everything else that he said, he was perfect, right? Bar Kokhba was not a false Messiah. He was not a false Messiah. He was a Messiah. He was a failed Messiah. It's a very different thing. It's a very different thing. You have to understand that going forward.
Because he was Moshiach ben Yosef?
No. Moshiach ben David.
A true Messiah but failed Messiah.
Absolutely.
Can it be Messiah?
Yes. Yeah. A Messiah is a person. A person can have flaws.
No, because
and flaws can destroy you. And this is the story of Bar Kokhba. Otherwise, the position you have is that, well, Rabbi Akiva just got it wrong. And we have no history of that at all.
And
No
did he
history.
ever withdraw? Did he ever make a statement, Rabbi Akiva, that Bar Kokhba now?
We'll come to it. We'll come to it.
David, the question, Bar Kokhba, was he also from Davidic dynasty, that he was a real Messiah?
We believe so, yes.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
so that's
right.
because if you say that
Yeah.
he was a Messiah.
And at the heart of this, you have to understand is that Rabbi Akiva vouched for him, and the majority of sages held that Rabbi Akiva was correct on this, right? So we're not talking about somebody who was a rogue general. We're talking about somebody who had the support of the rabbinic community, as well as a tremendously mighty army. Now let's look at it in a way that we don't usually look at it. We always look at the Jewish revolts against Rome as a struggle for sovereignty over a little piece of land in the Middle East. Right? That's the way we look at it. And that is a very big mistake, because that's not what it is. If that's what it is, the Romans would have come in and crushed it, washed their hands, right? Said, here are the taxes you're going to have to pay. You little people, you're irritating us, right? We're the Romans, don't mess with us, right? And on. No. They were, the end of this story is the destruction of the temple, the destruction of more than a third of the Jewish population of the world at the time, the destruction of Judaism as we knew it at the time. There was a creation of rabbinic Judaism that came out of it that was only one sect at the time of the destruction of the temple. The final destruction of Betar, the bodies were piled 7 feet high like a wall. The Romans salted the land from the Galilee to Jerusalem so nothing would grow. They resalted the Temple Mount, burned everything, renamed Jerusalem, built an arch to the victory against the Jews in Rome, right? The generals who fought successfully and destroyed the Jews were promoted to Caesar, to the emperor. They forbid the Jews to go to what used to be Jerusalem on pain of death. Now this is excessive, I would say.
Very much so.
As the CNN likes to say, it wasn't proportional. It was not proportional.
Politically correctly
right?
saying, yeah.
If, on the other hand, this war threatened the existence of Rome and the empire, as opposed to being an uprising that we're dealing with, all of it makes sense. All of it makes sense. Right? Which was it? Which was it? Right? Why did the greatest generals get brought from Gaul, from England, from different places to fight these people? And also, to come back to Lag B'Omer and the Omer itself, why do we mourn for 24,000 people for 33 days? We give the Shoah one day, and even that's a question. We give all our other tragedies Tisha B'Av. One day. One day. Right? This we give 33 days to. So it raises a lot of questions. Let's look at page 2 at some of the questions. Right? Starting with the second paragraph. There also appear to be glaring inconsistencies in the story itself. What were Rabbi Akiva's students guilty of that they deserved to die? Mm-hmm. If Rabbi Akiva's students died as a result of God's punishment for their sins, why should we mourn for them? Mm-hmm. No. Didn't they deserve their punishment? Next question. Why is Lag B'Omer a day of celebration? If all that happened on Lag B'Omer was but a temporary halt in the dying, and by the way, the destruction of the Jewish people, wouldn't it be more fitting to set aside a memorial day for the 24,000 scholars who died? Next. What's the connection between Lag B'Omer and the revolt against the Romans by Bar Kokhba and his army? And how does all this relate to Shimon Bar Yochai, author of the mystical books of the Zohar, who lived in the same era? Student of Rabbi Akiva. Mm-hmm. One of the 5, Rabbi Shimon is one of the 5, that Rabbi Akiva rebuilt after the death of the 24,000. And if you look at the Gemara is virtually based on those 5. Mm-hmm. On those 5. Finally, why are all these questions not discussed in the open, as, for example, the 4 questions of the Passover Seder, right? We love questions. Mm-hmm. But when Lag B'Omer comes, we take out our plastic bows and arrows and get our barbecue ready, right? You know, make a bonfire, go sing and dance, right? What's going on? Get a haircut, you know? The answers to these and other questions lie shrouded in the history of a turbulent age and in the mysteries of the Jewish concept of the Messianic era. The Second Temple was destroyed in 70 CE. Right? 70 CE. Jerusalem and the surrounding countryside lay in ruins from border to border. Now this is the time of Josephus. Mm-hmm. Right? This is my link to what's supposed to be our class then, right? In his book, Yigdal Yadin writes about the Bar Kokhba revolt, that one of the tragedies is that Josephus died before the second revolt. Right? And so we have very little records of really what happened during the second revolt.
Second revolt of what?
I'm coming to it. Josephus wrote about the destruction of the temple in 70 CE, and after that he went to Rome and wrote his books. Mm-hmm. Right? Jerusalem and the surrounding countryside lay in ruins, border to border. Scores of thousands died in the fierce fighting, and subsequently from the persecution and starvation. Thousands more were sold as slaves and forced into exile. The Romans considered the Jewish nation defeated, obliterated, and done. The Roman general Titus erected a grand victory monument in Rome, which stands to this day and says just that. There's a word that is in the English language that comes from this story, right? The famous Arch of Titus, on which is inscribed Judea Capita, Judea capitulated, right? Is the basis of the word kaput.
Yeah.
Right? Right? Judea kaput. Right? Finished.
German word?
Right? And this was what? It came in, it's from Latin.
Yeah,
No, but
It's from this.
Capita, it's in Latin.
Capitulated, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a this was, by the way, inscribed on the coins of Titus and Vespasian as well. Mm-hmm. Right? Judea. Again, Roman coins about this little country. Right? What's going on?
Too much honor. Small country.
Yeah. You know, I mean, there was a battle, I think it was during the Reagan era, where there was a concern that in Grenada there might be a communist takeover. Mm-hmm. Right? And Reagan, I think it was Reagan, sent the Marines, and they dealt with it. Right? Does anybody remember the name of the general? who landed in Granada and dealt with it? I don't think so. Right? Why? Because it wasn't important.
Probably it was
Oliver North.
ideological war.
What?
It was ideological war.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's a story, and I don't know can't remember the details about Bar Kokhba did something to show contempt for fellow Jews.
We're going to come to his fall.
I know there's a story,
Yeah.
but can't remember
Okay.
how it was.
But even in defeat, the spiritual leaders of the Jewish people struggled to rebuild the Jewish life and recreate Jewish institutions. So we understand what happened, right? There was a war that was fought roughly for 30 years. It's the war that we're going to learn about, that Josephus writes about, from around 35 to 65. And then in 70, the temple is destroyed, and the Jews are finished, basically. Taken into exile, murdered, etc. Right? Around 135, so we're looking at another 70 years, 60, 70 years, the Jews bounced back. They were so successful that in 135 BC, a Jewish military leader named Bar Kokhba succeeded in organizing a fighting force to rid the land of the hated Romans. Thousands rallied to his cause, including the greatest Talmudic scholar of all times, the Tana, the master, Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, whose insights and brilliant decisions fill the Mishnah. Maybe that's what he meant when he said, if I am not for myself, who will be for me?
Right.
And if I only am for myself, who am I?
What am I?
And if not now,
When?
when? Maybe this is the moment he was talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe this was part of his rallying cry. Right. Many of Rabbi Akiva's contemporaries felt that the new revolt against the Romans was doomed to failure and urged the avoidance of bloodshed. Bar Kokhba persisted and succeeded in organizing and training a superb military force of 200,000 men. Right? The Maccabees, at their height, fighting the Greek armies, had 8,000 men. Most of the time it was roughly 4,000. Right? He had 200,000 Jews under arms, trained.
Where did those Jews come from? I mean, so many.
The Talmud relates that Bar Kokhba demanded that each recruit demonstrate his bravery by cutting off his finger. Sounds like the Japanese criminals will have deal. The Japanese mafia does it to their own people. It'll come to
I
me.
think it's very not Jewish thing. We're not supposed to.
That's right. When the rabbis protested,
By the way,
he substituted a new test.
You know?
When
Who wanted to introduce that? Bar Kokhba?
to prove your loyalty, you had to sever a finger, right? When the rabbis protested,
Nobody
he
holds anything in that.
when the rabbis protested, he substituted a new test. Each recruit was expected to uproot a young tree while riding a horse. Such was the level of their bravery and readiness.
We're not supposed
While
to
you're
hold
riding a
trees.
horse, you grab a sapling, right? You have to have the power to hold on to it while the horse is going and pull it out of the ground. This is not easy.
I have to tell you, this is what
Rabbi-
we need in the desert. You know, people
Rabbi-
pulling the trees.
Rabbi Akiva disagreed with his rabbinic colleagues and won over the majority to his point of view. From the military point of view, he felt that a successful revolt was feasible. He felt that a successful revolt was feasible. It is said by some historians that 20% of the population of the Roman Empire between Rome and Jerusalem were Jewish.
Wow.
Now, I understood, this is a very interesting statement, what I understood was 20% of Rome could tell you when was candlelighting. Every fifth person. If you ask 5 people
Yeah.
in the streets of the Via Veneto, right, on a Friday afternoon, what time is candlelighting, 1 out of 5 could have told you.
They can be gears.
What?
They can be gears.
Of course.
So that's
Yeah,
the
of
problem.
course.
This is the problem.
No, not necessarily. Don't jump to that conclusion. So, 20% of the population, from Rome to Jerusalem, some historians say, were actually Jewish. Now, we know in one of the things in Roman synagogues, in Rome itself, the seating was larger for people who were in the process of Garrus than for people who were born Jews. It's something to think about. What? They had balconies for people who were in the process of becoming Jewish, right? They were larger than the seats for the people born Jews. Right? The pagan foundations of Rome were crumbling. Many Romans were in search of a religious alternative. I mean, you know, when I was a young child, my father used to sometimes read me Bullfinch's mythology, Greek and Roman myths, right? They're great stories, but they're silly, you know. Thunder is because the gods go bowling, you know. This god doesn't like that god, consequently this happened. It's for a people, you know, of Plato and Aristotle and Pliny and all the Herodotus to be believing in this stuff. They must have realized that this was foolishness. The problem was that it was also the religion of the state, right? You know, and it empowered the emperor at different times as a deity, right? So it was not something you could remove easily, but people in their houses must have thought, this is silliness, right? Many Romans were in search of a religious alternative, which many of them subsequently found in the mitzvah-less Christianity, Judaism light, so to speak, in the following 2 centuries. Many Romans were attracted to Judaism, and significant numbers converted. By the way, especially the women, right? Because grown men were very hesitant to convert because of the pain of bris milah. That's all. They didn't want to. There were thousands, tens of thousands of sympathizers, people who didn't convert, but were, for want of a better term, Noachites. Even members of the Roman Senate converted to Judaism. If the large number of Jews who lived throughout the Roman Empire could be inspired into a coordinated anti-Roman revolts, many historians believe the prospects of toppling Rome itself, the empire, were very real. And in fact, historically we know that throughout the empire there were, in different parts of the empire, monotheistic revolts against Rome.
The Catholic Church, it sort of models itself after like the Sanhedrin, and they have the Pope, which would be the Kohen Gadol, and then they have the 70 bishops or whatever that are right under the Pope, like the 70.
The cardinals.
Sanhedrin.
The cardinals?
Cardinals, whatever they are. They're 70.
Right.
And they do all these things that mimic Jewish religious activities. Kippas.
Well, you know the story about the kippas, right?
No.
There was a conversation once between Cardinal Spellman in New York and Rav Moshe Feinstein. Very often in New York City events, the mayor would invite the representatives of the religious community to be part of the dais with him. And there are many stories told about Reb Moshe finding himself sitting next to Cardinal Spellman at the dais and exchanging conversation. You know, and the cardinal said to Reb Moshe, you know, we have much in common. You know, for instance, we both wear skull cap, right? And Reb Moshe said, yes, we have. And he also said, and by the way, we both have institutional religious schools. And Reb Moshe said, it's true, Cardinal Spellman. The difference is that your skull cap is red. Mine is black. But your school is in the black. And mine is in the red. Meaning that they were well funded. So the point here is that it wasn't about this little island in the middle of the desert. right, called Palestine, called Israel, right? It was, in fact, a real challenge to the empire. As you put it was ideological, but more than ideological, it was revolutionary.
So that might be what was rooted in Constantine making the Christian religion.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Making, instead of Saturday, he changed to Sunday. He instituted Sunday as a day of reconciliation.
Yeah, and he made a Jew into a god.
It wasn't because he actually liked the religion. Really, it was...
It says Constantine didn't become a Christian himself. His mother did. Right? So he had a Jewish mother, right? In the end. But whether he did or not, it was entirely a political decision.
So I never knew.
He was unable to defeat the monotheists, the Jewish monotheists. But he hit upon a great idea. Right? He said, right, what we'll do is we'll create a Jewish light, make a Jewish rabbi into a god, right, which they would never do, right, and put him instead of the Roman eagle in front of our legions, right, and that will topple this faith. And it was very effective. In fact, interestingly enough, 2,000 years later, the Nazis, Maximo, understood that they didn't have to go to war with the Christians. They philosophically understood if you destroy the Jews, Christianity itself will fall of its own weight. And that was part of their plan, right? They described themselves not as Christians, but as barbarians. An idea that simply the strong will survive was the basis of their belief. It was Darwinian, right? So how do you deal with the Pope and the Christians and everything else? Destroy the Jews, and everything that's built on them will collapse by itself, right? It's exactly what Constantine did. He created an alternative force rather than destroy monotheism, and it was very effective. Right?
So what about Muslims?
What about?
Why didn't...
That came much later. That was not part of this story, right? That came much later.
Hitler and Muslims.
Oh.
It's a very interesting question.
I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, they have this point of view, they're like Jews.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that question. It's a good question. We won't go into it today, all right? Because we'll never finish this. If the revolt succeeded, and the Jews from all over the world united to return to their homeland, Rabbi Akiva believed that they would bring about the Messianic era. The great era of spirituality and universal peace were told by the prophets. Skipping down to Rambam's statement in the Laws of Kings, this is a definitive statement from Rambam about what Messianic times is like. People always say, what is it going to be like? What is it going to be like? Right? And of course, there are many different opinions. Rambam's is one that is, if you live today and look at the contributions of the state of Israel, the Jewish people in the state of Israel, to the world, in agriculture, in medicine, in military, in desalinization, in water, in virtually everything, obviously high tech, in agriculture, right? During their whole time at war, look what Rambam describes as Messianic times. Do not think that the Melech HaMashiach, the King Messiah, must work miracles and signs, creating new natural phenomena. Restore the dead to life or to perform similar miracles. This is not so. For Rabbi Akiva was the wisest of scholars of the Mishnah and was the armor bearer for Bar Kokhba. This is Rambam speaking. The natural family name of Bar Kokhba, the king. He said concerning Ben Kasiba that he is the Melech HaMashiach. Both he and the sages of his generation believed Bar Kosiba was the King Mashiach, Melech HaMashiach. I'm just reading Rambam's description of Bar Kokhba. But once he was killed, it became evident to them all that he was not Mashiach.
And that's what it's
So what is Rambam saying is the Mashiach does not need to perform miracles. He has a job to perform. We know the definition of it, right? But once it's performed, we're living in it. We always talk about, at that point, we'll see godliness in everything. Rambam doesn't say that, right? He's saying that there is a King Mashiach who will bring peace to the world, right? With a Jewish leader, right? Recognized as such, right? It's quite simple. That is to say, Israel, which in its first 65 years has, look at other countries that are 65 years old compared to Israel. Imagine what it would be if it was a country in peace. Right?
North Korea and South Korea, 67 years old.
Yeah.
South Korea not bad.
Bar Kokhba, and by the way,
They say in the Talmud more than in Israel.
Bar Kokhba and his officers all seemed in readiness. Rome was rotten and corrupt. Many captive nations strained at the yoke. Rebellion was in the air. Rabbi Akiva gave Bar Kokhba a new name, Bar Kokhba, the son of the star, in fulfillment of the prophecy, a star will go forth from Yaakov. We're actually going to come to that very soon, actually, in the Torah. Bar Kokhba trained an army capable of igniting the powder keg of rebellion, and Rabbi Akiva lit that powder keg with one of the most dramatic proclamations in Jewish history. He proclaimed Bar Kokhba the long-awaited Melech HaMashiach. One of the greatest Torah teachers of all time, Rabbi Akiva, could not have made this crucial radical declaration unless he was certain. He would never have proclaimed a man Mashiach unless he knew. Rabbi Akiva added a new spiritual dimension to the war of liberation. He attempted to merge the soldiers of the sword with the soldiers of the book. His 24,000 students, each a great Torah scholar and leader. And then the next paragraph explains that, as I said, that they were intended to be the ambassadors of Israel to enlighten the world. Right? That was the plan. Right? The fact that the Jews were able to unite around a single leader separates this event from the great revolt of the previous century, when bitterly divided factions warred with each other inside the walls of Jerusalem, even as the Roman army stormed the gates. Remember, our real class, which is about Josephus, talks about a time a good 60 years earlier, in which there were basically, and we're going to come to this in more detail, 4 powerful groups. Some larger, some smaller, but all influential. One of the ones we know about is the Essenes. It's famous for the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were a group that left Jerusalem to move out to the Dead Sea area because they were fed up with the corruption. They were ascetic people. And they were very different than the Judaism of the cities. No question about it. There was another group called the Sicarii. We call them the Zealots. Sicarii is the ones with sharp knives. Those who disagreed with them when they were in public gatherings, it said, Josephus says, they would stab them in the back.
You don't agree with the
so, okay, we're going to daven chakras today, right? Watch my back had a very important meaning at that point. They would, at a public gathering, they would stab their enemies in the back and then walk away, right? Very quietly, right? And the people would fall down, die, right? And they would move away. They were assassins, basically. They were the Zealots. We know that they burned the supplies inside of Jerusalem to force the Jews to fight. They are the villains of the Josephus story, by the way. Not Titus, not the Romans, and also not the majority of Jews. It's one of the kind of interesting things about Josephus is he chooses specifically the Zealots to make the enemy. not the Jewish people. He makes a lot of very kind statements about the Jewish people, actually.
I can understand
This was-
zealots don't look too good.
This was, by the way, the Zealots could have looked like patriots who were going to resist the Romans under all conditions. You would have said that there was a previous
So they
set.
were Jews.
There were a previous set of Zealots that are great heroes.
Maccabees, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. But his description of the Zealots in the Sicarii focuses on their hostility to other Jews and forcing other Jews.
I
Right?
will say today zealots is those who sit on territories.
We're going to come to that, right? But the point of this revolt, years later, under Bar Kokhba, right, is that the Jews were actually united at that point, right? They didn't have these 4 divisions at this point, right? And partially because 3 of them were destroyed by the Romans previously. We'll come to it, right? So the rebellion raged for 6 years. Bar Kokhba's army achieved many initial victories. Many non-Jews joined Bar Kokhba's army. Right? It is reported that it grew to 350,000 men, more men than the Roman army itself. So this adds fuel to the fire in terms of the importance of this revolt.
Could it be that like a lot of maybe Roman Jews were joining them?
Certainly a lot of Noachites, the equivalent of Noachites, monotheists, were joining them.
So a lot of
right?
non-Jews were joining them.
The people who were rebelling against Roman oppression were coming to this battle, which means that this battle was much more dangerous than just a couple of Middle Easterners fighting against a great empire. Bar Kokhba was so successful that Hadrian called in all the best troops from England and Gaul. Rome felt threatened as never before. On Lag BaOmer, it is believed by some that Bar Kokhba's army reconquered Yerushalayim. And we celebrate that great event today. For 4 years, Jewish independence was restored. Gee, it's an opportunity for show and tell. I don't have it with me. I have a coin that was my father's, right? That was minted during those 4 years.
A real Bar Kokhba coin?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It was minted during those years, right? For 4 years, Jewish independence was restored. Many believe Bar Kokhba actually began to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. Some even believe that he completed building the 3rd temple.
What do you mean? Where is it?
What?
What in the house?
Hang on. Some believe. It's not a majority view, obviously. Right? There were 2 Roman legions in the country when the uprising began, one in Jerusalem and one near Megiddo. Both were decimated by Bar Kokhba's men. Reinforcements were dispatched from Transjordan, Syria, Egypt. But these 2 were mauled by Bar Kokhba. The legion sent from Egypt, the 22nd, disappeared from the listings of military units published in Rome. It was struck from the list. Scholars speculate that it was cut up so badly, probably around Lachish, that it ceased to exist as an organized fighting force. The Jews apparently employed guerrilla tactics, foraying from their underground tunnels, ambushing convoys, and striking at night.
So Palestinians, they're not the first.
In desperation, Hadrian sent his best commander, Julius Severus, who was then engaged in a battle in the hills of Wales. Severus imported legions from the lands of Britain, Switzerland, Austria, Hungary, and Bulgaria. Bar Kokhba murdered the sage Rabbi Elazar. He accused the great rabbi of revealing the secret entrances to the fortress city of Betar to the Romans. It's now believed that this betrayal was the work of Jewish Christians who wanted to undermine Bar Kokhba. Rabbi Akiva, they succeeded. Rabbi Akiva then realized that Bar Kokhba no longer possessed the qualities which initially led him to believe that Bar Kokhba was Mashiach. He never actually made a statement that it seems that he's not Mashiach, but he withdrew from him. He separated himself from him.
Hashem anointed Shaul as king, and later on he changed his mind.
Yeah,
and he wanted to do the
anointed
job.
David.
Yeah, so it can happen.
At this time, the Great Plague. At this time, the Great Plague struck Rabbi Akiva's students. There seems to be...
At what point it stopped? After I decided that he's not a Jew?
After Rabbi Elazar was killed, and Rabbi Akiva stepped back from Bar Kokhba,
the Messiah.
it seems that's when the students began dying in very large numbers. Yeah.
Why? Why? What's the punishment?
It's a good question. It's a good question.
Do you have the answer?
What?
Do you have an answer?
We're going to get to it,
Okay.
yeah. Rabbi Akiva's students didn't show respect for one another. Right? That comes back to this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Precisely what this phrase refers to, we do not know. With greatness comes heightened responsibility, and with greatness comes the magnification of reward and punishment. With them died the messianic hope of the era, and for thousands of years to come. Bar Kokhba was not a false Messiah, but a failed Messiah. In the terrible war which followed, Bar Kokhba and his army were destroyed in the great battles defending the fortress of the city Betar. The war had been a catastrophe. Dadio Cassius reports the death of 580,000 Jews by Roman swords, in addition to those who died of hunger and disease.
How many do you say?
580,000. This is after. This was 60 years after the destruction of the temple, right?
And this is part of the Roman conquering of
Betar.
Betar.
Right.
That was part of the completion of the Roman overall victory, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Some scholars think that the bulk of the Jewish population of Judea was destroyed in battle and in subsequent massacres. One historian believes that the Jews lost a third of the number in war, perhaps more fatalities than the Great Revolt in 70. Right? The survivors of the Bar Kokhba uprising marked the great divide between the hope for national independence and dispersal in the diaspora. It would be 2,000 years before there would be a Jewish fighting force. As a result, the hope of the Jew for redemption was to be delayed for at least 2,000 years. In the great tragic defeat, not only were between 500,000 to 600,000 Jews killed, but the Romans were determined once and for all to uproot the Jewish religion and the Jewish people, to bring an end to their hopes and to their dreams. Dreams that were messianic dreams. You know, Marx wrote about religion. It's very famous that that religion is the opiate of the people, because the religion that replaced our faith was a religion of compromise. It was a religion that said the world is divided between God and the emperor.
You're talking about Christianity?
Right? Yeah. Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. Right? This is an opiate of the people. Right? What do the people get? The afterlife. What does Caesar get? The gold. Right? The golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. Caesar understood this. Right? Right? That was not a Jewish way. The Jewish way is we are made in the image of the Creator. Each one of us. Right? And even a slave possesses rights. Right? And no one should be enslaved forever. There shouldn't be a class of people who are born into slavery. Neither should there be a class of people born into indefinite wealth. It had to be shared. The whole Jewish system was one that opposed the excesses of empire. So it was not an opiate of the people. It was dangerous and revolutionary. And as people pointed out at this table, Constantine knew how to deal with that by creating a different version that would work well with the empire.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
We see it now on paper. You were talking about it before. Why we don't discuss it?
Coming to it. And we are discussing it. Interestingly enough, these things were never discussed. Now, many people discuss it. We're getting to the point right? And there's good reasons why it wasn't, and there's good reasons why it is now. Every anti-Semitic outbreak for which Jews suffered since that day, the fall of Betar, every pogrom, massacre, crusade, Holocaust, and banishment that took the toll of so many millions during 2,000-year history, long history of bitter night of exile, wandering and persecution, plagues of hatred, must be traced directly to the failure of Bar Kokhba. He could have succeeded. He could have won. None of that history had to happen. But ultimately, also in the failure of the students of Rabbi Akiva.
What about Rabbi Akiva?
He paid a price too, by the way, personally. Yet, on the very Lag BaOmer day 2,000 years ago, a new hidden light of hope emerged. In the midst of all of this, remember, Rabbi Shimon is a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva. Right? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai revealed to a small number of students the secrets of the mystical Zohar. Because Lag BaOmer deals with the secrets of the future of the Messianic age, it is not discussed openly or understood as clearly as the Exodus. The Exodus happened. The Messianic age is yet to be. When we stand between Pesach and Shavuos, between physical liberation of Egypt and our spiritual elevation during the revelation at Sinai, we recall those chilling events. For today, we are also able to celebrate the liberation of Jerusalem and the site of our destroyed temple. History is bringing together many crucial events. The history of our ancient past is once again coming alive in the land of our fathers. And people point out, grudgingly, that it seems inappropriate to have Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaTzmaut during the Omer, day of remembrance of those who fell, and Israeli Independence Day. My wife pointed out to me an interesting thing. Does anybody remember the number of people who were remembered Yom HaZikaron this year?
Through the whole the wars of independence and all the wars
from the founding of the modern state of Israel.
Well, like 4,000
either through
something or something.
It's
a lot. It's a lot.
Wait a second. Okay.
It's a lot of.
I want to know. It's over 23,000.
Yeah, it's a lot of. Those are soldiers that died. People that died.
No, so everybody.
No, not everybody. It was soldiers who died or people who died as a result of terrorism.
Terrorism, yeah.
Right.
20-something thousand.
Over 23,000.
Wow.
23,000 were mentioned? Or?
During the history.
Yes, their names are read. Yeah.
So
They read 23,000 names.
But you're talking about the disappearance from Holocaust era?
No.
From the founding of the state of Israel until today,
All the wars have been
one person should speak. From the founding of the state of Israel to today,
From 48.
over 23,000 people have died either defending the state of Israel in uniform or Kiddush Hashem as a result of terrorism.
Wow.
Does that number strike anybody as interesting?
Yes. Like Pinchas, Rabbi Akiva said.
It's getting awful close to 24,000, right? Hopefully it will never get to that.
That's exactly what it was.
Hopefully it'll never get to that.
Isn't it the time of Pinchas when he killed 24,000?
That's right. Also 24,000. Also 24,000.
Plague when he
Also 24,000. The history of our ancient past is once again coming alive in the land of our fathers. There are frightening parallels between our own age and the age of Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kokhba. Following a frightful Holocaust 70 years ago, right? They're celebrating the liberation of the camps. They're celebrating in Holland, right, this week, the liberation of Holland from the Holocaust, right? Following a frightful Holocaust, which many believed would spell the end of the Jewish people, we're experiencing a restoration of Jewish independence. Once more did a Jewish army score miraculous victories against overwhelming armies. Following the destruction of the great European centers of Torah scholarship, we witnessed the rebuilding of yeshivot in America and in Israel. We experienced a great revival of Torah study. The Tshuva movement has brought about a return to Torah for so many who strayed. Jerusalem and the Temple Mount are in our hands. All around us, world empires are tottering, while despair and corruption rages. Once again, the Jewish people have been entrusted with a great and frightful opportunity. Once again, we have been given the potential to recreate a Jewish civilization of Torah greatness in our own land. Will we succeed, or will our efforts be aborted because of our own failures, our own inability to respect the differences within Torah community and unite the Jewish people to our cause? It is not enough to wait for Mashiach's coming. We must toil to perfect our Torah lives if we are to bring about this speedy arrival. Only if we learn from the lesson of Rabbi Akiva's students will we understand that the coming of Mashiach depends on us.
Right? The unity of Jewish people, the stress, love, and all that
Wrote
stuff.
this is Jonathan Saxon.
No.
Huh?
So, I just want to end with saying that there is a concept within Jewish learning that it is not theoretical, that it is practical. When you get up from learning, you should take away something that you can use. 2 days from now is Lag B'Omer. Do something more than make a barbecue. That's my suggestion. Do something more with yourself or with the Jewish people.